Hello, and welcome to my podcast. My name is Crystal Johnson, and I am a second year English major at the Cyril Potter College of Education. I have a deep interest in literature because I love learning about how life has been or is for different people around the globe, regardless of age, race, and gender. I think stories are timeless and can teach us countless lessons about perseverance, love, and society, regardless of our current situation. The core CSEC novel and plays requires us to explore the novels and short stories that can be found on the syllabus for the Caribbean Secondary Certificate Examination. This particular assignment requires we read the selected short stories Mom Lobby and the Social Worker and Man of the House. Then choose one of them and examine the difficult situation the child in the story is put in. We are to further this discussion by identifying a similar situation in our community, family, or school. It then challenges us by causing us to utilize our problem solving skills by asking us to provide a possible solution for the issue presented in the short story. I find this current assignment to be extremely enjoyable and enlightening to do because it requires me as a student teacher to link the content within the short stories or novels to real life. As teachers, it is no secret that we'll be dealing with children from various socioeconomic backgrounds, and some children may just be living in situations extremely similar to the ones presented in the short stories. To focus on is Man of the House by Frank O'Connor. This story is narrated in the first person and centers on a young boy called Sullivan. His mother has taken ill, and he selflessly takes up the mantle to care for her until she feels better. It is clear that they're mostly on their own with no husband or father figure present. Therefore, he has to take up the role as the man of the house. I find this title to be very telling, and a line that stands out to me within the story is it's a funny thing about women, the way they'll take orders from anything in trousers, even if it's only 10. This shows that due to the patriarchal structure of society, men are placed in an elevated status even as children, and women are not only expected to, but also accustomed to submit, often without much question. Sullivan displays an incredibly high degree of maturity for his age when looking after his mother. Additionally, he behaves very rational and calmly. This is perfectly displayed by the following line when speaking to his mother regarding getting some cough medicine. Write it down, I said. If I haven't it written down, I might forget it. And put strong in big letters. What will I get for dinner? Eggs? Sullivan seems very prepared to take on the role as man of the house, and his main priority is shifted to that of caring for his mother, rather than being a child solely occupied with playing and going to school. Eventually, however, the reader can see that all of this responsibility is becoming quite burdensome for him, as displayed as by when he looks at other children going to school and behaving in a carefree manner. This is also evident when he desperately prays and hopes for a miracle and begs the Blessed Virgin for intervention. His mother's lack of improvement begins to scare him terribly, and his tough exterior begins to really crack at this point, and we see him become increasingly vulnerable as the story progresses. The incident in which he meets the little girl Dooley, who influences him to drink out his mother's cough medicine, highlights his yearn for the pieces of his boyhood that are being robbed from him. This moment of weakness shows that he is in fact just a child who would rather socialize and eat candy with friends rather than act as the head of a household. Upon confessing that he finishes his mother's medicine, the same medicine required for her to get better, Sullivan's mother immediately forgives him and even soothes him as he experiences immense guilt over his actions. And I believe his mother is also dealing with guilt of her own because her son had to be put in this position in the first place. The situation is resolved when he's able to revert to his natural position as a child in the household. And as the story ends, he is now in the bed and his mother is attending to him, which is a contrast to the beginning of the story. Unfortunately, stories like this are far too common. And I have witnessed instances in my own community where children have to take on adult responsibilities. In this case, the child in my community was a girl who had to take up the role as the woman of the house because her mother left due to the abuse she was facing from her husband. And I keenly remember that after looking at her brothers and sister, she would often cry at her window and call out for her mother. It was extremely evident that the strain of being a mother to her siblings and having no one to guide her was eating away at her self-worth, at her happiness, and her ability to just be a child was completely taken away from her. And I must admit, I cannot personally relate to the children in the stories because I am a last child and I have several older siblings, so I was never put in the position to be a caregiver over younger siblings or even act as a caregiver towards a parent or guardian. So this story has really caused me to reflect on what I see in my community, and it has helped me to become more empathetic. If I was given a chance to confront the situation in the short story, I would have ensured that the mother had appropriate medical help from the beginning. Although I understand and acknowledge it's a tough spot to be in as a parent, and that public health institutions and healthcare workers aren't always dependable. But I think the interest should always go back to what is best for the child. Now, Sullivan should not have been put in the position to deal with an adult who had the potential to become even more seriously ill. When her son asked her if she would like for him to bring a doctor, she responds, and I quote, "He'd only want to send me to a hospital. And how would I go to a hospital?" I understand where she's coming from at this point, but a doctor later on in the story has to be brought in because she isn't getting better. And in my opinion, why not spare your son from having to take on this responsibility and miss school when the very thing you were avoiding you had to still end up doing in a way? Although she didn't visit the hospital, a doctor still had to be brought in. I also would have been inclined to see if members of the community could be of more direct help. The character Minnie Ryan, for example, I believe she would have been more helpful by offering to watch Sullivan as his mother is tended to, instead of just offering advice and being judgmental. For most of the story, Minnie Ryan and his mother just agree and go along with what he says instead of interjecting and saying, "No, you should be in school. We are the adults in this situation and we will handle it." When seeing the amount of strain that Sullivan is under, Minnie Ryan says in a quote, "Wisha, isn't he very good?" This is a common trend within the story. They give him constant praise when he takes on all of these responsibility. But Minnie Ryan she doesn't insist that, you know what, I can be of more help as an adult. I can take on watching Sullivan just for now as his mother is being taken care of or she's recovering from her illness. So I think that in situations like this, the community can really come together to help the affected children. It may not always work out smoothly, but I do think it's our responsibility to try. In closing, I would like to say that although it is easy to make certain choices and decisions from an outside perspective, I do acknowledge that the adults in the short stories and the short story, man of the house specifically, were doing the best they could given their economic situation, perhaps their educational level, and they didn't have much support. His mother was a single parent. However, to ensure the adults of the future are functional and healthy, the adults of today need to take responsibility for the children and ensure they have the best childhood they possibly can. This brings us to the end of my podcast. Thank you so much for listening and do enjoy the rest of your day.